Back again, Tony D'Angelo here in Connecticut Morning with our pal Dan Burke, who is concerned about sounding like Muggs McGuinness. And if you don't know who Muggs McGuinness is, you gotta look him up. But anyway, Dan has come up in the snowstorm to share with us many of his the objects of his fine work at the Stamford Historical Society, and we were just having a good time. Thank you so much.
Good to see you.
Thank you. And Dan, for those of you who have either met Dan, Dan and my brother Mike were in the same graduating class at Stanford Catholic, so I've met Dan recently, and I didn't know that Dan had worked with HBO, and we kind of swapped stories back and forth. So you were beginning to tell an anecdote about Soupy Sales.
Oh, yes. I try to condense this so I don't waste too much time.
It's okay.
My dear friend and my son's godfather, Jake Jacobson, was the senior writer-producer at HBO. Very gifted guy. And he had an idea for putting on a jazz show, like some weekly jazz show, and he had this great idea. His reputation was such that they gave him the go-ahead to use the HBO broadcast facility to see how it came out. And everybody who worked it volunteered. The cameramen, everybody, the lighting people and all. And he got George Shearing to come as a guest. I'm not a jazz guy, so I forget some of the names of it. George Shearing, another very famous jazz musician, a big band. They were known as Widespread Depression. They were younger guys playing big band music, very, very good. And as a celebrity guest, they got Soupy Sales. And now I was an administrative guy mostly, and just so I could experience what one of these things was like, Jake let me be on the stage working with my good friend Jerry Hurley on the camera, and I had the high-tech job of holding the cable so Jerry wouldn't trip over it. Jerry, by the way, is the cameraman who took the famous shot of Willis Reed coming out of the locker room at halftime.
In 1970, yes.
Anyway, it was all scripted. Oh, by the way, and the host of the show was a fellow named Jazzbo Collins, who was a very famous jazz DJ in New York, very eccentric guy who used to run around in a jumpsuit.
Al Jazzbo Collins,
right.
Yes.
And he was the host of the show. And it's all scripted to fit in a certain time frame. And at a certain point, Soupy starts, I guess you can call it ad-libbing. And it's sort of starting to throw the sequence off. So Jake calls for a cut and sends his production assistant, young Fran Shea, out to ask Soupy to knock it off, in so many words. So now, Soupy Sales to me was the guy I knew from his show when I was a kid, with White Fang and Black Tooth.
Sure. Yeah, we grew up watching him.
Yeah, and I thought, this is a guy, this is a guy I think is always happy, always in a good mood and everything. Well, Fran came out, and he tore into her like nothing I ever saw. And I understood later that with some celebrities this is not uncommon. But I was not used to it. And Fran Shea was a young kid who everybody really liked. She's a lovely young girl. And he's ripping into her, and I'm 5 feet away from this. And I was convinced at a point that, he wanted to see if he could make her cry. Well, she stood her ground, and he stormed out. He said, I quit. And just like that, for whatever reason, the entire production just fell apart. Cameras were put down. Everybody's just standing around, now what? And people start wandering around, and it all ended. The whole concept ended, the whole thing ended with Soupy blowing his top and upsetting everybody. I went out in the hall, and I run into another one of the writer-producers, Jimmy Donaldson, who was preparing to interview Buddy Hackett. And I'm standing talking to Jim. And he goes, well, what happened in there? And I said, I'm paraphrasing myself. I said, I got to tell you, Jim, I'm really disappointed. I have all these years, Soupy Sales, I thought he was this great guy, and it turns out he's just nothing but a big, I can't say what I called him.
Right.
What I didn't catch was Jimmy sort of like widening his eyes and gesturing behind, like with his head to look behind me.
So
I turn around and Soupy's standing there, putting a scarf around his neck that I felt like strangling him with, glowering at me after he heard what I just called him, and he went storming out the door. And the funny part about this is later on, well, for me, I had my first date that night with the girl that became my wife. So I always wanted to thank Soupy for giving me something to talk about that night. And Fran Shea went on to become one of the prime movers in the E! Entertainment Network. I mean, she's about 10, 12 years younger than me, and she's retired and quite happy and successful now. And I kept thinking over all these years, and one of her friends was at this event, and afterwards she sent him a newspaper clipping from some obscure little Connecticut town about the grand opening of a pizzeria. And the celebrity guests were some guy named Shecky something, like Shecky Moskowitz, I think it was, and Soupy Sales. So Fran Shea becomes a big wheel at E! Entertainment, and Soupy Sales is opening up pizzerias. And that was my story.
And to our friends watching from the greater New York metropolitan area, we're all a little sadder this morning.
Yeah. But Soupy, what are you doing? And the Jimmy Donaldson, when he and Buddy Hackett, he showed up that day. I saw him come in the building, and I always got a big kick out of Buddy Hackett. I still do.
Yeah.
And he came in the door, and he was green from too much medicine the night before. And he turns to Jimmy and he says, "Look, you better not ask me any stupid questions." So Jimmy's like, "Okay, Mr. Hackett, I can." And I might be wrong about this, about what the question was, but it was, I think it was, is it true your father was a shoe salesman or something like that? I thought it was. Or your father invented the director's chair. I don't remember exactly what it was. And Buddy had his excuse for not doing the interview, so he could go home and nurse his hangover. And he said, "That's it. You dumb little, I told you no stupid questions," and up and out the door. And poor Jimmy's standing there looking like somebody hit him over the head with a frying pan. Anyways.
You know, it all makes you think. That story of Jack Benny. You know, of course, Jack Benny was his act was the cheapest man.
Right.
But yet they said he was the best tipper in Beverly Hills because he could not convince people that he really wasn't that guy.
Yeah.
You know, it's just really...
Back in the 70s, I worked in restaurants, and I don't know if you recall the Admiral Benbow.
Yeah, down off Chapin Avenue.
Yeah, it's gone now. It's this beautiful old stone building that was once a private home, and they turned it into the Admiral Benbow restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
Admiral Benbow was the pub in Treasure Island where it starts out. But it was rather expensive. It was an out of the way place, and the guy wanted to get out of it. And his staff used to come to us. I worked at another place not far away, and they would close the Admiral Benbow for the night and early. And come down to our place and complain about everything, about what it was like working in that place. And they told us a story, though, about Frank Sinatra coming there. And he came in, and this is kind of nuts, but one of the things they told us was the owner was so paranoid at that point about not having everything to sell that he would actually tell the waiters and waitresses not to give people the silverware unless they asked for it. Now, I wasn't there to see him say that, and that does sound crazy, but that's what some of those staffers would tell us. And, of course, immediately said, "Can I have a knife and fork?" And they bring it over. Sinatra showed up one night with his entourage and noticed some schmutz on his fork. And if you ever worked in a restaurant and you worked the washing machines, it's just these big, super hot things that sometimes it literally bake things onto them. And so instead of just saying, "Yes, sir," and switching the forks, the owner came over and grabbed the nearest busboy and started screaming at him, apparently in front of everybody out on the dining room floor. "You don't do that." And Sinatra was so embarrassed for the kid that after the owner walked away, he gave him a $1,000 tip. And when my friends and I took my friends took over that place, and I worked there.
Mhm.
We had a couple that used to play ragtime jazz, and we were talking about that, and they talked about how they used to play down in New Orleans, in a place that Sinatra and his gang used to come into, and every time the kid came around to fill the water glasses, he'd peel off a 20 and give the guy a 20. So he was like apparently extraordinarily generous to staff like that.
Yeah, he was called a man, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, he came in when it was called Mackenzie's by the Sea when my friend owned it, and
Mhm.
I worked there. And he came down there thinking it was still the Admiral Benbow, and he'd have some, never be anybody there, it'd be private. And we had just been written up in the Sunday Times and given a pretty good review, and the place was packed. And he had to wait in line outside like everybody else. And our chef, who was Italian, in his world, Pope Sinatra was there for dinner. They were the Holy Father.
Yeah, yes, yes.
And
Yeah, this is DiMaggio and the Pope all rolled into one.
And, he grabbed the nearest waiter. He found who's getting Mr. Sinatra's table, and he grabbed the kid. He goes, you better get this right. Everything exactly how he wants it. I don't want to mess up this. I'll break your head again. So Frank orders base scallops, nothing on them, and a bottle of ketchup. So it was great. I did the poor guy had to sit there though. He held the menu to the side of his face because people were staring at him when he was trying to eat. He just, it was. Anyways.
Yeah, it's
I'm
quite
rambling.
a world. No, and believe me, it's I think that if you circulate, you have a story here to tell and there to tell, and it's a fascinating thing. Anyway, you have brought us some wonderful stories wherever you would want to begin.
These are little tidbits from Forging a Community, an exhibit at the Stamford Historical Society that I was curator of.
And we'll begin with number one.
Yeah, and that was the a little poster for it. I was approached when I retired from HBO, and I was looking to just keep busy. I started volunteering at the Stamford Historical Society, and the director, Mr. Tom Zubek, Dr. Zubek, had this idea for putting together something of the history of sports, and he asked me to do it because my family's pedigree goes back to Stanford High football and basketball into the 1920s, and I played myself in the Bobby Valentine era. I was one of the opponents, always dreaming about breaking his legs, but never got the chance. So we started putting it together, and it was just something to keep me busy. And in the end, it took me about a year and a half to put this thing together, and I learned so much.
I did too.
Yeah, it was a great way. Sports, and you can say the same thing probably about Bridgeport and Norwalk. All of these towns that had a large influx of immigrants that did manual labor, or worked in the mills, worked in the factories. They all played ball, and it was like a big social event. And it also brought all the ethnic groups together. In Stanford particularly, and you know this, it seemed that all the Italians, most of the Italians settled on the west side. Most of the Slavic people, like the Poles and the Russians, down the south end,
right.
And the Greeks were over here, and the Irish were over there. They'd come from countries in the late 19th century that had kaisers and kings and emperors and czars, and there was this rigid class system, and you could only do this. They'd come to the United States and find out that it didn't matter what class you were. Your kids didn't have to be blacksmiths because you were a blacksmith. You could be a blacksmith and your son could become a lawyer or a doctor. And they could all go to school together. It didn't matter what class. And they would end up on the same teams together, or cheering for the same teams. And if you're the right guard, in Polish, you didn't care that the left guard is Italian. Nobody cared because they were just kids. So that was the seed for this. And my uncle and his friends were a perfect example of this. They all played together on the 1929 Stanford High State Championship team. But they had been a unit playing together as early as late grade school. And there were 2 Greek twins, a bunch of Italian kids, a couple of Jewish kids, a couple of Russian kids, and my uncle who was Polish and Italian. And they were together forever.
It tells you what it was all about. So we'll go on to our second
Some of
slide.
these,
Actually,
this is,
no,
oh, look at that guy.
Yeah, actually, no, I went
okay.
ahead, actually, and moving to number 2.
That's number, okay. This is, we had a banquet about the opening of this thing. With these, I wanted to just include some of the people.
Sure.
Right in the middle, of course, we see Bobby Valentine.
Right.
Who spoke at a banquet we had about the exhibit. On his left is my good friend Frank Abbott, who was a tremendous.
I remember
yeah,
Frank. Yes.
He's a great guy. He he played baseball with Bobby.
Right.
And was on championship teams. Some of those championship bats we had there, Frank was involved in that. He was on the Ripon State Championship football team in 1965. That, if I always say, if I was an inch taller, I'd have caught the third, and we'd have been the state champions. But and on the right is Jimmy Zanino, who was a terrific running back at Stamford High back in the middle '60s, and he's involved. He's pretty well involved with the Stamford Historical. I mean, rather the Italian Center in Stanford. Mm-hmm. We're going to be working together, trying to gather some information.
Please
soon.
give him my best. My mother used to babysit his infant daughter. My mother was a serial babysitter. So moving to our
this
third
is
slide.
that is Joe Anzalone, who was an assistant coach at Stanford Catholic when I started there in 1962. Mm-hmm. He's an assistant along with Bob Horan to the legendary Bob Lynch. And he has an amazing memory. Came up from Florida to see the exhibit. And,
yeah, you had mentioned that.
Yeah, and just a terrific guy. He remembers everybody and everything.
Now, is that your sweater in the back?
That is my sweater.
You had it all that time?
Well, it's locked in the closet somewhere. You know, most of the people have all these treasures hidden away that they don't know about. It's back. The exhibit is down, so that thing is back in the closet. And I yearn for the day that I can fit in it again.
That's really neat. Now we move.
And that is some scoundrel that came in and tried to steal a bat.
I played in one game that year, and I'm proud to say it. And you know, Tony Sochi, my manager, who's forgotten more baseball than any of us remember. And he's in Florida doing well, and John Hull, another good friend.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, this is the bat from the team, the championship team your brother played on?
Exactly. Now this is this is a bat, every championship team, I guess, gets one of these commemorative bats from Louisville Slugger.
Right.
And this is the, and you were so kind to break apart the exhibit so I could hold it up, and it's a, it's a beautiful. I mean, now this was in the town hall you had mentioned, and it was under
some of them. We had some of them upstairs, and a lot of them were donated. Jerry Leone, who was Mickey Leone Senior's nephew and Mickey Junior's cousin, of course, has an absolute gold mine of sports memories. You know, if we had a ton of money, it would make a wonderful local exhibit. I mean, I went up to see him to see what he had, and he let me. His family is related somehow to Phil Rizzuto, and he let me swing around a bat that Phil Rizzuto used to use, and all kinds of photographs.
God bless the scooter. We'll move on to the next one. And
that is Vito DeVito on the right, and Carmine Tasches on the left.
I see Mr. Tasches.
These people, if you're not from Stanford of a certain area, you'd have no idea who these guys are. Carmine Tasches, he looks like he can still play.
Yeah, is he still local?
I believe he is. But he was a great coach.
Yes.
Very fierce-looking guy. You know, when he was younger, I remember him when I was a kid. Vito DeVito was a great ball player in his day, and he signed a minor league contract way back in the day. But I have another picture in here. We can get to it of him later on. So
we'll go to our next slide. And
this is Vito in 1939 on the left, and this is him when he came by to see the exhibit. He came all the way down to New Haven, and what I love about this is, you know, he's, as you can see, he's quite elderly now.
Yes.
Everybody knew who he was in the day, and there were some people that said he was, you know, arguably the best baseball player ever to come out of town. Even, and that's a town that had Bobby Valentine in it. And Vito, he left Stanford. He became a coach around New Haven. I understand they have ballparks named after him. He's so well thought of. Two friends of his, younger guys that are involved in American Legion ball, brought him down one day He came in and he was moving like an older man. And he came into the exhibit and he turned right where the older stuff was, and he saw these pictures of himself and his contemporaries, and it like somebody plugged him into a wall. All of a sudden he's standing taller, he's grinning from ear to ear, and he's remembering everything. He's, well, there was this game against New Britain back in 41.
Yeah.
I was on second. Andy Robustelli was at the plate. So that was always, when the older guys would come in, and just light up at the memories. It made all the effort worth it. The exhibit's cutoff was the early 70s when my younger brother was on a state championship team.
Right.
So guys my age and my brother's age, I'm 65, but in this exhibit, we're the babies of that exhibit.
Yeah.
You know, you saw it. You know,
right.
You know, we're all 60s, late 50s. We're the babies. All this wonderful, the most wonderful stuff that came from the guys that were before us.
And we'll move to our next slide, and
this is going into the
kids
section.
To the kids section.
You know, this is one of my favorite things in this. And
moving to the next.
We come, kids younger than a certain age never played with wooden bats.
Yeah, what's that?
You know, and they play with aluminum bats. They make that strange sound when the ball hits it. But back in the 60s and 50s and before that, everybody played out in the sandlot. Maybe you know, if you're like in a working class neighborhood or something, there might be one or two wooden bats, and all the kids wanted to play ball. And if your bat broke, you're not playing. So it's hard to see in this small picture, but you would do anything to keep playing. And if you saw this bat, it's cracked down there. There's electrician's tape around the end, and all around the barrel of the bat on this one, there's nails and screws holding the top together. And that's what I found so amusing about it. I remember that so well, trying to, you know, keep the ball together when the lacing would start coming out, and literally nailing a bat back together.
And getting that tight taping, so when our test was always you would hit the knob on the ground. If you heard dot, dot, you didn't get it right. You had to hear dot, dot, meaning that you had it.
Yeah.
It's the simplest thing.
If you'll notice, if you can see in that picture, this is a sandlot game there. There's a giant rock as home plate. These are just kids. These are the three DeLeo cousins.
Oh, cute!
And this is at on the Little League field on Vine Road. That was the first Little League field in town where the first Little League game was ever played.
Now that same field.
It's still there.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and that's where it was. And Abby DeLeo, Buffy DeLeo, Junie DeLeo. Junie DeLeo was a great baseball coach for kids. My nephews played for him.
Did he play some minor league ball?
He played minor league ball.
I thought he did, yes.
He's what a lovely guy. And he is Dante Chickatel's son-in-law. Dante's the 100-year-old.
Yes.
100-year-old
Dante, Frank's brother, yes.
Yeah.
Frank, who was a fixture for many, many years. And moving to our next slide. And
there's a bunch of Stevens School kids. All the schools have their own teams.
Gentlemanly game of ball.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, you know, you had to get all dressed up to go to school. When you have recess, they'd go out and they'd play ball and come home with their knees and their pants torn out. You know? Go to school next day with patches on you.
So talk about Muggs McGinnis. I think third from third from the left.
The frustrating thing, we'd find these wonderful pictures in all these odd places, and the frustrating thing was there'd be no names.
Yeah.
So I put them up on a Facebook page, hoping somebody would recognize their grandfather or something.
Something like that. And we're coming up on a hard break, but we'll do this next slide coming up in the sequence. And this is, as we wait for it to appear.
It's the St. John's Altar Boys team of 1911.
Wow, you feel like you need a caption here. We're no angels.
That's exactly, yeah, I wonder. I wonder what they said when they struck out, you know.
Now,
sorry, Father.
Did they play other church altar boy teams?
There was an entire altar boy league.
I have no idea.
We'll move along here. You can't. There was such a passion to play ball.
For ball, yeah.
For anybody.
Playing ball.
And when I the opening night of the exhibit, I said, this is my, I said, this is the result of a year and a half of research on my part and 170 years of Stanford kids playing ball together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it was, you know, and everybody wanted to be part of something, you know, and it really brought the community together, brought people closer, you know, and it seems odd to some people, but no.
No, it's really something, and it's like if you take the history of Stanford 1970 forward, which really was the whole change and, you know, whatever you want to call it, it's the urban redevelopment, whatever that means to so many. And just this whole legacy going back is just fragmented, and this exhibit just did a wonderful job of putting it all together. But with that, we're coming up on a hard break. Tony D'Angelo and Dan Burke here in Connecticut Morning, December 17, 2013. The best is yet to come. Right back after this.
Nou, dit is dus de huiskamer. En dan komen we hier bij de slaapkamer. Oh ja. Met...
I'll tell you, Bing might have had that right during White Christmas. We have a white day here on December 17, 2013, but we're here for you. Tony D'Angelo, Dan Burke back at Connecticut Morning. Dan, we open up this slide here, which is a sort of a landscape, if you will, of the exhibit and how things were arranged over at the Historical Society, formerly the old Martha Hoyt School. And this is number 2.
Okay. Shall I begin?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah, this is one of the rooms. The thing was enormous, and I'm telling you, they had to throw a bucket of cold water on me to get me to stop because they kept finding things. And we put stuff up even after the exhibit started. You just come across something that this has to be part of this.
Yeah.
You know, and but there's so much. There's so many teams. We were going to do originally everything. Football, baseball, basketball, boxing, bowling, tennis, golf, ice hockey, but there was so much stuff, there's so many things and teams and people doing, that there just wasn't enough room, and we thought that if we did do that, there would be a little bit about a lot, and no depth. So we decided, at least at this one, to start with the 2 big ones that would cover the most, and that would be football and baseball. If you,
you had to see it. And what we'll do is
this is just one of the rooms. There were 2 rooms in a long hallway.
We'll go to number 3, Mark. We'll get caught up more when my computer finds. And these are the Ripple-On banner, and then we have some pictures along the side.
Yeah, that's out in the hallway, all through the halls. Some of the very old teams on the left. We try to make some of it chronological. Going back to Stanford High teams of the 1800s.
And what really fascinated me was the service teams.
Yes.
The teams of people in the service playing.
You know what? I should have put a couple of these on this disc. To you know, the tank destroyer division seemed to have a lot of baseball teams that had a lot of Stanford kids on it, and it was, you know, I found pictures of. You know, the catcher tagging out a guy trying to score, and they're both of them from town, from Stanford, on different teams. And they never stopped playing ball.
It's amazing. So we'll move to slide number 4, and I think we have a familiar gentleman.
That is Al Shannon.
That is the Al Shannon.
And Al, it was a great deal of fun talking to Al. During this exhibit, with it, you know, just the stories, the things he remembers. Aside from being an all-state football player himself, one of the toughest guys around, he was a great coach. He introduced Pop Warner football to Stanford.
Did he? I didn't know that.
He did, yeah. And he took over the Stanford Golden Bears, the semi-pro team. That originally, it began in the 1930s. It had been the Stanford Pros, and it became the Golden Bears, played in the Atlantic Coast League, and we have some shots of that later on. But Al took it over from Denny Bunick, and he had some great stories about it. Denny would talk about when he had the team about getting calls in the middle of the week from some other semi-pro team in one case up in Providence, Rhode Island, and that the team they were supposed to play that weekend had to cancel, and they all needed the money, so they called up Denny and said, "Could you get your team together and come up?" So Denny rounds up the Golden Bears, and they get in the bus, and they, snow and rain and cold, they drive all the way to Providence, Rhode Island. They play a game in which they get beat, covered with mud, freezing cold, no locker rooms, get back on the bus, drive all the way back to Stamford, all huddled up trying to stay warm, and got $20. And it was like pure love of the game. And Al told a great story when he had them taking the Golden Bears down to Southern Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
And what people don't realize is Southern Maryland considered itself the northernmost southern state.
Yes.
And during the Civil War, Marylanders would shoot at Union troops.
That's right. That was
marching
the Nixon
along.
line. Yeah.
And so Al took the Golden Bears down to play the local team. And when they got there, they found out that Lenny Rivers and the number of the black players on the team, that you couldn't eat in the same restaurant, they couldn't stay in the same hotel.
That was the climate.
So, yeah, it was still the climate then, and that would have been in the late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah.
Then they all said, the heck with this then. And Lenny and I forgot, Alonzo Lucas was another great player. They had begun to talk to the black players on the local team. And they said, well, we've got a great barbecue place in our part of town. So Shannon puts the entire Golden Bear team on the bus, and they go over to that part of town and go into this barbecue place. And he described it, the door opens up, and in walk 6 or 7 huge white guys. And the people in the barbecue place going, oh, this is not good. Who are these guys?
Yeah.
And then of course the rest of the guys come in, and Al said that they had a wonderful time. They all came in. They listened to the music. They danced. They drank all night. They barbecued together. And when the night ended, Al went to the owner and said, "Thank you very much. I'd like to pay the tab." And the man said, "Coach, we ain't never had any white boys in here for dinner before. I suspect we won't have any again in the future. It's my pleasure. It's nice to meet you." And but Al was loaded with that. He coached Bobby Valentine.
Yes, he did.
He said when he first met Bobby, he had heard all about him, and he said, "So Bobby, what do you like to do?" And Bobby said, "I like to dance."
Yes, that's right.
What do you mean? He told me this kid's a ball player. So, well, of course he was. You know, I remember introducing Bobby at one of our banquets, and I played football at Catholic High the same time he did, and the stuff was incredible. I played in one game where I scored a touchdown. Again, this was against the number one team in the state. I scored a touchdown, a 2-point conversion. I had sacks at defensive end. I had an interception at safety. I almost ran a punt back all the way, and we knocked off the number one team in the state. And I felt like $1 million. We're all going home. We just knocked them off. Carmine Lamone, one of our assistant coaches, is listening to a little transistor radio, and he's, holy smokes, what happened? Valentine scored 6 touchdowns against Fairfield Prep, which was number 2 in the state. So yeah, anyways, that's Al. You have to get it. He's a great interview.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure. God bless him. And actually, I think here's a couple
that
of
is Jack Hagan, Coach John Hagan, who himself was an all-state football player at Stamford High and went on to coach several state championship teams. Some of the great names of our era were coached by him. And that's All-State and Bobby Augustine.
Bob Augustine.
This picture here in the middle is Bobby. It's hard to see because it's so small. The picture on the wall above them. That's when they just won the state championship, or the FCAC championship, and they're out in the field, and Coach is in the middle and Bobby's to the right. Bobby was very, very helpful in putting this together, and very modest. He has this amazing picture of him making a one-handed touchdown catch that year, and he didn't want me to put it in a prominent place. He's sort of embarrassed.
Wow, that's a really, really, really nice picture.
Somebody
Mr. Hagan looks well.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
And we'll move over to number 6. And
this is Denny Bunick, who I had mentioned before.
Yeah.
That when the Golden Bears sort of folded up the tent when the World War II broke out. And then after that, you had guys like Denny who were too young for World War II. And they were terrific ball players. And you didn't have, people didn't run off to college. Some did, but it wasn't as,
Yeah, it
as
wasn't as
necessary as
prominent,
now.
yeah.
So you had all these very, very young, talented guys who did not want to stop playing football because they weren't in high school
Right.
anymore. So but Denny went out with a guy named Johnny Potenza, and they reestablished the Golden Bears in the late '50s. And Denny was a Stamford firefighter as well, and he was playing, and the fire chief would go to him. Unit, what's this I hear you're playing football? And he had to say, I'm not playing. No, I'm not, I'm just a coach. So then he played for a little while, and then he just took over slowly coaching and then managing the team until it finally folded up for
Is
good.
he still local?
He is still local. He was honored by the Old Timers Association just a couple of weeks ago.
Great. That's great.
It's hard, you know. His knees are kind of banged up, you know, but he's a lovely, lovely man.
Boy, and that's how ball continues when people continue.
This is just
Number 7.
Bobby. There's Bobby Kennedy. When we opened up the exhibit, he
Yeah,
came up to spend it.
right.
He was the big sports. He and Freddie Willis were the big sports
writers of the Advocate.
of our era.
Yes, they were
when we were there. You know, and he says he doesn't remember it. But when I was a young kid, I did. The year after I graduated, I was on the sideline watching a Stamford Catholic High game, and they let because I knew the coaches. They said.
Mhm.
And one of the guys on Stamford Catholic runs sideline and just can't quite make the catch. And a voice from behind me says, "You'd have caught that." And I turned around, and there's Bobby Kennedy, who was a kid himself, just a few years older.
Mhm.
And I remember being enormously flattered that he even knew who I was.
Mhm.
And I think he was just saying it to be nice.
I remember.
He said he can't remember it, so.
And I have memories of his dad. I remember
Yeah.
his dad in church doing the offering, and he just seemed like, I never met him. I mean, I was a really
Yeah.
little kid, but he seemed like such a nice
Yeah.
gentleman.
His-
Commissioner of the NBA.
Commissioner of the NBA, mayor of Stamford.
Mayor of
He
Stamford.
coached football at St. Basil's when St. Basil's, believe it or not, was
I didn't
a
know.
threat. St. Basil's used to beat Stanford High.
Now, was he also for lack of a better term, an attendant for Newt Rockney?
I don't know. I'd
Yeah.
have to ask Bobby about that.
He was Notre Dame.
He might have been. He was Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Um,
And we'll move to number 8.
that is Mayor Bruno Giordano.
Mr. G, God bless
And
him.
he came in
Mr. G was at the
to
game.
see the exhibit. That's Ron Marcus, who you know, on the left.
Yeah.
And that's Mayor Giordano in the middle. And he's another guy, remembers everything, you know.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I just think
I worked
sitting there
under
like,
him,
oh,
I
my God, you know. I just did little pictures on a little bit in the dark side.
Mhm.
So that was just a few
Yeah,
of the folks
and
that,
he was a guy, he was a very young mayor
mhm.
of Stamford, and he served, I think it was it 2 terms, I believe? Yeah, and I think he might have won
Yeah.
his second term in a squeaker.
Uh,
And then we'll go to number 9.
This one is I just put this up. That's Joey Claps.
Hmm.
And you know, Joe, I
never
put
met
this
Joe.
because he's a
Yeah.
great guy.
Yeah.
He came to see the exhibit. When he spoke at a banquet for Mayor Pavey, when Mayor Pavey won, and all the other speakers were worried about having to come after Joe. And I'm going, Joe Claps, and Joe from Catholic High, that a couple of years younger than me, at Catholic High. Why are you afraid to go? Oh, wait till you hear him speak. And after he spoke, I knew why nobody wanted to come after him, because he was hilarious. And Joe came in. He's looking around the exhibit. He was alone. We go around and walking through the baseball room, and he looks up at the pictures, and we had a picture of a Clunan, I believe it was Clunan, junior high baseball team, probably from the 1930s, maybe even early 40s. And he lets out a gasp, and he turns away, walks about 10 feet away, and he turns around, his eyes are welled up, and he said, "You did it, you got me." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "That's my father." And he points to the picture of this young kid in the background of this team photo. Joe's father, he lost his father very young, you know, and Joe had never seen this. And it's one of those moments, like I said, that
Well, you know, and
just,
there's such a connection, and that's
yeah.
the incredible
Okay,
thing.
we did the
And
rest
let's
of
just
them.
see, we went down to here, and actually,
We're
I
doing
think,
kids are this sweet. Here we go.
yeah, and those are the altar boys, since we'll go to 19A, I believe.
And we had the St. This is the St. Mary's
St.
Altar
Mary's.
Boys baseball
Wow.
team from 1907. These are the older. They're old, you know. The senior. Anyways, the other one was the St. John's baseball team. That's the St. Mary's team of 1907.
And they all have uniforms.
They all have uniforms.
And the catcher has a mask, and it's amazing. And I guess father is the coach.
Yeah.
And let's move down to 20.
This is one of the again one of these enormously frustrating pictures. Somebody dropped off an album with a bunch of stuff. A lot of the stuff was from the 40s, and a lot of some of the stuff had names. Most of the stuff did not.
This is a wonderful
And
day like
this
today.
is, yeah. And this all we know is these are Stamford kids. We think it's early 40s, but we're not sure who they are or where they are. But this this is just great. If you look at these guys, I wish I knew who they were. I put this up on the Facebook Stanford page, asking if anybody knew. But
Yeah, it's
this thing was the album this was in was full of stories about the St. John's Boys Brigade, which was they didn't have Pop Warner yet, but it was a young kids football league, and that had names on it, but little articles and stuff about them, and a picture of the St. John's Boys Brigade team. But I could not I couldn't cross-reference anything to this picture, but I just thought that's lovely stuff.
it's amazing, and you know they're out playing in the cold, and everything's fine. Move to number 21.
And this is picking sides. This is the 1955. If you remember throwing the bat, and you had
Sure.
to catch the bat and put your, to see who picks who, and you had to hope you didn't suffer the humiliation of being the last guy picked.
And that's your quintessential
This one has
picture.
names, actually.
Yeah. And everyone's got a striped shirt and a hat, and
That's
know,
right. Probably
they're all-
wearing black U.S. Keds, high cuts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Or PF Flyers, depending what
That's
your
right.
preference was, and that's an amazing thing. So we'll move to 21A, and here's
Now this one,
a young man on a phone.
this is, it's hard to imagine. Now, you just sign a piece of paper saying you want to play in the Little League and you're on a team,
Yes.
which is good. When we were kids, well, it's like in the 1950s, in the late 1950s, there were so many kids,
Yes.
baby boomers, that they had these huge tryouts.
Yes.
I was in the Springdale Little League area, and they had these huge tryouts. There'd be a couple hundred, 300 kids.
Yeah, there were cattle calls.
Yeah, and you'd have your tryouts, and then they would say, well, if we'll call over the weekend, tonight or tomorrow night.
You'd have to sign in and put your number.
If we call you, you'll tell you what team you're on. If you don't get a call, you didn't make it.
Yeah, come back.
And everybody go home. That used to be the most painful 2 nights of your life.
Yes.
And my mother used to get phone calls from her cousin and our neighbor, and they would just chit-chat. And I'm like 10 years old, pulling my hair out. Ma, what are you doing? You're killing me here. And who's that Mrs. Ritchie? She lives 3 houses ago. Don't knock on the door and talk to her on the porch. Get off the phone. I didn't make it the first year. I made it the second year. And that's when I saw that I remembered the moment.
Kid.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm gonna get to wear the uniform, so we'll go to 22.
Yeah, this is just this is my Springdale neighborhood a million years ago. The guy on the right is Terry Anderson, who died young, which is very sad. He was my first best pal in Springdale. Randy Kemp is next to him. I think that's Rick Sanacero in the middle. And the other 2 guys I'm not quite sure of. I might have another picture in there, but this is what every neighborhood looked like. And we get up in the morning, and in the school year we got to be on the weekends. Summer we just go out in the morning, and our mothers were not worried about us being taken away by anybody. You grab your helmet, and you go outside, and you play ball all day, and you come home when you're tired or somebody calls you for dinner. But I just, those helmets offered absolutely no protection. Nobody cared. I got a helmet.
Boy, and they really look cool. So now we'll move to 23.
And this is for any that is Mickey Leone Jr.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just thought, anybody who played
That
ball
was a Mick fan.
He played on the 1951.
Yes, he did.
Little League World Series championship team, and he was a great coach. All through, he carried on his father, Mickey Sr.'s tradition.
Yes, he did.
Of coaching kids and tutoring kids. Mickey Sr. opted out of a pro career to stay in Stamford as a police officer and coach kids. Everything, boxing,
Yeah.
baseball, football, great tradition.
Yeah, and that's a great. Now, how did the society come across this picture?
Jerry Leone, his cousin, had all
Jerry
these
had it.
wonderful things.
Neat.
And not just Mickey.
So we'll move over to 24.
This is the waterside. This again, I think that local people might find these very old things interesting. The Waterside School baseball team of 1911 on Selleck Street.
Boy.
That whole area just went apart, and then it's coming back now.
And that's an interesting style of ball cap, because the early pictures of Babe Ruth, like with Boston, you see him wearing that like a bowler or something.
You see that? Well, I'm not sure. I think I have it in there. We have a 1905 hat that was worn by the Stamford High right fielder, and it almost looks ridiculous. It's that small, but it was more ornamentation. You see a lot of guys without a hat playing,
So let's just see. We excuse me. We go to 25.
This is the Stamford Boys Club. We found this in, of all places, a nature magazine. I'm sorry, the Stamford Weekly Guide of 1928. This is a bunch of Stamford Boys Club kids playing the Sandlot game out on Woodland Place in Stamford. And again, this is one of these things. God, wouldn't you love to know who they are?
Mm-hmm.
What's their name? What kid is what kid? You think of these little guys over here in 1928. I mean, if they're still living, they're well into their 90s. This is a treasure, and
it's excuse me. I mean, it's like, and they're playing without gloves in a lot of cases.
Well, Major League didn't start wearing gloves until the 1870s.
That's
why
right.
We had these ridiculous scores before that,
And back then they would leave their gloves on the field when they came in.
Yeah.
And I think we've gone through this, but this bears mention.
Well, this is just...
No, this is a later game.
This is a later game, 1873. They covered everything. They called it, it was like two separate words.
Yeah.
And these are neighborhood teams. And this is what I found fascinating as it's like a bunch of kids who get together and they say, we're going to have a team. We come from this neighborhood, and we'll call ourselves the Lively Turtles. And they would play, and then they would get reported on. But a game of baseball between the Seaberries and the Lively Turtles on Thanksgiving Day resulted in a tie. The following is the score. Meanwhile, we may say, on general principles, that every well-regulated bat swinger, when defeated, should accept the situation gracefully, and not be so base as to bawl about it. I just
Des Bryant, are you listening?
Yeah. Hoping the Seaberries may display a little more Christian resignation in the next unsuccessful match.
I challenge you to a duel.
all of the articles are very flowery. These are just, I know you can set through these if you want, but
here's 27.
We had these up too, trying to discover all these little neighborhood teams, and I just did this, like pulling out box scores.
Well, actually, I'm going to shut this down, and I'm going to shut this down. I think for some reason, there we go. Put too many images up. And my computer's like, which one do you want to go to? 19th century local baseball teams.
The Excelsiors, the Ripwams, the Grey Rocks, that's Grey Rock Place, the Black Roads, the Emeralds, the Aberdeens, the Sylvans,
the Modocs.
The Modocs, that's an Indian tribe. But I mean, the Alerts. They're everywhere. I mean, it's like just there'd be a neighborhood game, and the local paper would come out and report it. There's,
And moving at 28.
it's the same thing. The
Yeah.
Seaberries, the West Parks, the Westcotts, the Pacific Streeters, the Hoytvilles. Hoytvilles were big.
Mm-hmm.
Hoytvilles is interesting because the Algiers and the Waters. The Algiers and Hoytville were sections of town. The Hoytville was interesting because in the 19th century, the Irish were pretty much, even though they were here in great numbers, were locked out of everything. They wouldn't rent or sell to the Irish. And Mr. Hoyt came along, and he bought all the property pretty much from the train station down to the water, and it became known as Hoytville. And it was populated. It ended up because he would sell to anyone who could afford it. He had a lot of the Irish down there, and they formed their own little teams. And one of the oldest teams was the Hoytvilles, and we have a picture of them somewhere in here.
Coming up in our exhibit. Okay, so what we'll do is
if you want to skip the next one is just another list of the 19th century teams. If you want to skip that,
so we'll go
right
to slide 30.
Yeah.
Okay, and slide 30 we have.
These are the Betts Academy. I just thought people would get a kick out of the uniforms and the size of these guys. Betts Academy was a private school on Strawberry Hill, pretty much in the same place where Stamford High is, perhaps a little farther up. Royal Stadium at the time was where Royal Stadium is now. At this time, it was all marshland. It was swampland. And there was a big field behind Betts Academy. And when Stamford High first came into being, they used to play football and baseball at either Cummings Park or behind Betts Academy, the big fields behind Betts Academy. But these guys were around for a really long time, 1800s, baseball and football.
And that's your equipment, really.
That's
Nothing happening at all. So we'll go to 31 here, and we've got another group of gentlemen. And
this is Betts baseball, 1897. This is like, we have dozens of these pictures that aren't included. There's so much that could have been included, but it got repetitious.
How did this material survive?
Well, people, it's Lord knows how much stuff is out there in people's basements. Somebody will come and say, well, Grandma died and we're clearing out the house, we got this old stuff, and we thought we'd give it to you. And these boxes will appear at the Historical Society. You start sorting through it. Quite often it's a lot of junk, but every now and then there's a treasure. We have a whole folder of Betts Academy stuff. Betts Academy's been closed, I don't know how many generations ago. It just stopped existence. But somebody gave us a whole big folder full of Betts Academy pictures. Some of them quite large. Programs, pictures.
I never knew it existed.
I never knew it existed either. There was a bunch of them. So people will leave them. We have an old baseball glove that I think is in here. Somebody donated.
Well, we'll go to 32 for now. And actually,
and that's the King School team of 1890, when King School was closer to the middle of town. I just thought people might find that fascinating. No shoulder pads.
None.
No helmets. The little stocking caps.
And they're
They have what look like quilted vests on.
It's an amazing thing. Now, what I'll do here is I'll scan down, and we're coming up on our hard break, and you can tell me which one you'd like to.
Well, this is fast. This is fun. Number 33.
Number 33.
Sort of primitive. Again, Betts Academy, and this is lining the batter's box in the 1890s under close supervision. He's got a bucket of lime and a spoon, and he's sprinkling the lime to mark the batter's box,
In the suited gentleman, this is absolutely unbelievable. And where do you think this ball field was?
We pulled out. We have these old Sanborn atlases. They were insurance atlases.
Yes.
And we try to pinpoint where it is. And boy, I'm telling you, it was probably. How do I describe this? Imagine across the street from the old St. Joseph's Hospital.
Yeah.
That it was all back in there.
Over in there. Okay.
Yeah. across the street.
Yeah, and you know something that's kind of curious, if memory serves, that's sort of a downslope leading to Point Street, and you kind of get that impression in the back. So it sure is possible. So let's pick up one before we come up on a hard break, and we're going to go to slide number 34. And one of the oldest, the Hoytvilles.
That was the, yeah. That was we were talking about when the Hoytville came into existence, and they had sevell prominent club teams that would play out of there, and that's the Hoytville team.
And these are young Irishmen.
These are mostly young Irishmen. Again, I put this up, and a lovely young girl came in, Teresa Kavanaugh.
Mm-hmm.
And she was looking around the exhibit. She had come in to do some family research. Turns out that I graduated high school with her older sister, so we started connecting, And she looked at this picture and she said, "Oh my God!" And spotted this guy, Pete Kavanaugh,
okay,
her grandfather. So that's again, in an old little picture like this, she spots.
It's an amazing thing. Now, you have to think that all of the lettering and everything was, with great pains, hand-stitched on these shirts.
Yep.
And those must have been incredibly hot uniforms. I mean, I could remember.
Oh, yeah, the wool ones?
Yeah. Like we used to call in baseball, before they went to the sand knits and the double knits, those heavy wool things, we used to call them hair shirts. Right. That's like gorilla hair shirts. That's unbelievable.
I remember I fell into, I was in the Springdale Little League, and I was playing, just because you didn't have a Little League game that night, and I didn't mean you just didn't play ball someplace else.
Somewhere else, yeah.
So we were playing out in some great big backyard playing a pickup game, and I dove for a ball, and I slid head first into a gigantic patch of poison ivy. And I got so much poison ivy that I had to be treated by a doctor and take special baths and everything. It was all over me. And my eye, they were worried about my eyes and all. That did not stop me from playing center field for McCumber's Little League team. And put on that big gray wool uniform and played out in the heat. And I would come home from the game and this is kind of gross, but you can imagine the poison ivy blisters all over you. And I have to stand in the shower with my uniform on and with the hot water coming out, and my mother have to help me peel the thing off.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah, kids, you had to be there.
As the coaches used to say, if you want to be in a team, you gotta play height. I got poison ivy. It doesn't hurt. You gotta play anyway.
We'll end up here for this segment on our slide number 35. And this is the
Stamford High 1890-18 team, and there's nothing spectacular about this team, and there's nothing spectacular about the guys, but this is the generational thing, the thing that I got such a big kick out of putting this together. Mm-hmm. Up in the right-hand corner, kind of dark, is a guy named Ed Downey.
Okay.
Of no particular fame, he was just on the team in 1898. I graduated high school with his granddaughter. And so you can come through these things, and the Quinns and Schofields, Hoyts, the Hollies.
Sure.
All of these names. There's always a couple of people still around generations later,
sure,
all connected to these guys, and it was just became everybody wanted to participate and be in it. There's a long tradition. And this sounds corny, but putting this together and see who played, I kind of got a bit of a chill thinking that I was part of this long thing in my little tiny way.
And it's like how the fabric just weaves in ways that even today that we're just trying to figure out, but then amaze what we see. But anyway, we're coming up on a hard break. Tony D'Angelo and Dan Burke here. Come back for the last 30 minutes of this. The best is yet to come. And after that, our 12:30 hour, Major Leaguer John D'Acquisto, Hazy Shade of Winter, Simon and Garfunkel. We got it today. Right back after this. Tony D'Angelo and Dan Burke here on Connecticut Morning. And this is really, it's one of the most fascinating things I have seen in a long time, the Stamford Historical Society sports exhibit. We move to this slide of the Daily Advocate, December 7th, 1914. This is incredibly well-attended football game.
This is one of two pictures we were able to retrieve from old advocates to the point where we could sort of Photoshop it and make it more visible. Everett, Massachusetts of 1914 is considered to have been the greatest high school team in the history of sports in this country. In 1914, they had a record of 16-0, and the combined score of 600-0. They scored 600 points in 16 games, and no one scored against them. Stamford High played them that year and lost 68-0. Now, it says something about Everett because Stamford High was going around beating people 68-0 all season long, and they were undefeated. And Everett ended up going out to play a team in Cicero, Illinois, and they had a national championship for it, and Everett won. But those are some serious road trips.
Especially in that day.
Yeah, and I mean, talking to some of the old timers, you look at some of you know, in these days, before there was, not only was there not an I-95, there wasn't a Merritt Parkway.
No.
And there was only a post road, and probably one lane in each direction. And so you'd ask them, what were road trips like? How long did it take? So I finally found out that they would carpool. They'd find people that had cars, and they'd pile as many kids in to the cars as they could, and they'd take off from Stamford to, say, New London, New Britain, or even Everett, Massachusetts. And you'd look at the records from back then, and you'd see so many wins, so many losses, and occasionally a forfeit. That's because while they were driving, one of the cars driving to one of the games would get a flat tire, get lost, they couldn't make it to the game. And so it was very interesting to me anyway.
So where is this ball field?
Well, that is somewhere up in Everett, Massachusetts. It's not local.
It is Everett, Massachusetts.
The other picture we had, you can, some of the equipment is ridiculous. No helmets.
Yeah, Baker's dozen. You just go ahead and choose. I'll blow this out a little bit for you.
I don't want to do too much of the same old thing. Number 42, perhaps.
Number 42. Yeah, number 50 looked interesting as well.
Yeah, well, this is just a 1914 game. Stamford High against Dickinson. Dickinson is from New Jersey.
Yeah.
What's interesting, you can see how primitive the equipment is, and this guy, young Mr. Kelly, has no helmet at all.
None whatsoever.
And over behind Mr. Kelly, you see a guy with his hand up like he's going to blow a whistle. That is Michael A. Boyle, the coach of Stamford High, and he's refereeing the game as well. And that's how things used to go in those days. The team would show up, and one coach would look at the other and say, "You feel like refereeing today? Nah, you go ahead and do it." So you had to rely on the impeccable honesty of an Irishman named Boyle.
Yeah, try doing that today. The whole game would be a replay. So
just real quick, if you could do 41.
41. We'll go back to 41.
We had mentioned some of the old neighborhood teams, and what I love about this picture is they're in the street clothes. That's the 1915 Aberdeen's baseball team. Bunch of neighborhood kids, probably Aberdeen Street, which was in Stamford.
Yes.
And I love that. I love their all.
Boy.
Their high-cut shoes.
Some mugs, and they're going out to play baseball.
Hey, Wayne, you gonna play a ball game today?
I'm going to go to 50 just because it looks very interesting to me.
This is
your team.
That's Stamford Catholic in the dark, lined up against Stamford High.
Yeah.
In 1965, that's me, the right end, number 81.
Mm-hmm.
The funny, we all knew each other. The Stamford High guy on the left, sort of crouched down, is Dominic Labuglio, and his father had been a Stamford fireman as well as mine.
Ah.
And whenever I would go out as like a wideout,
mm-hmm.
or we'd do a slot, or I was out on the end, he'd come out there with me, and we kind of knew each other when we were kids. And you're not supposed to do these sort of things in those days. You look at each other like, I almost whisper, "Hi, Dominic," and "Hi, Dan." "Hi," boom, start beating each other. One of our guys, Rick Themey, on our team would line up against his cousin Jeff Beadle. Themey and Beadle, they were their business partners, and also big stars. Their fathers were big stars at Stanford High in their day back in the 1940s.
Now, who was your quarterback then?
That was Ben Salvatore.
That's Rick,
okay. Yeah, Rick Robustelli was going to be. He got terribly hurt in an accident, and he did not play this season. Even though he suited up, he didn't play. The next year, I think he threw 28 touchdown passes.
I remember Ben playing baseball slightly before my time.
Yeah.
And you take us where?
How about this real quick here?
Number 47.
The Tasty Mallows.
The Tasty Mallows.
I think last time I was here we talked about it. Might have mentioned it.
How about that?
Every business in town wanted to have a team.
Had a team.
And and it was a recreation for the guys. It was like a camaraderie and sort of loyalty to the company sort of deal. And of course, the big game in town forever was the Yale in Town team.
Yes.
And Yale in Town, they were the biggest employers, and there's something like 6,000 employees there at the time. And they were so big that they had a 6-team internal league, complete with their own uniforms, their own managers, their own equipment. But then they had their industrial league team, and they were the big guns. And their two primary rivals were the Tasty Mallows, which was a marshmallow company on Brown Street, and a team called the Zapons, which made zippers and leather stuff. And I didn't know. I just again, I wish we had the names of who these guys are.
Now, where is this ball field?
That would be a good guess. All we had was an old picture. I'm guessing.
It looks like it might be near Cove Island. I'm just given the background.
Cove Island was private property then.
Oh, okay.
So that might be Cummings Park.
I know.
Well, well, you ever get Ron in here again, have him tell you the story of how it became a public park down there. It's really interesting. It almost became a gigantic power thing.
Isn't that something? You tell me.
Just real quick.
48. And
of local interest, we had mentioned Vito DeVito before. That's him leaning on his old mail truck. And the guy with the catcher's leg protectors is Andy Robustelli. And they were lifelong friends. And they played for the Sacred Hearts baseball team from the West Side.
And that generated from the parish.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. They won the
CYL Bowl was big. I played CYL Bowl.
Yeah. And there's a story with this. That's a mail truck, and the mailman would just pull over to take a break and watch them practice or watch them play. I mean, everybody cared about it. When they won the championship, I didn't include the picture here, but when they won the championship, there was a huge parade up the West Side, and we see all these kids on a float going along West Main Street with the entire community out cheering them along.
That's great. It's a really neat picture.
Do you want to try number 51?
51. That looks incredibly interesting. You know, this is like you never get.
This is the coin toss for the first ever FCAC championship game between two undefeated Stanford teams. Stanford Catholic, my alma mater, and the Rippewam of November 1966. This is the year after I graduated. And I like to think that because of my senior year, that's why this happened. Because we were two Stanford teams, maybe a mile apart, both undefeated in my senior year, but not scheduled to play each other. So the next year,
Now, who are the people in this picture?
That number 9 is Rick Robustelli.
Yep.
Just inside him is Johnny Thies. That's Bobby Kuchta, who just passed away.
Yeah.
I think number 33 is you know what? I'm not even sure.
Maybe our fans can tell us.
Yeah. Bobby Valentine was a sophomore star on that team. I don't think he was captain yet. But anyways, this is.
Is that Nicky Coles on the right?
I don't think Nicky Coles did football.
Yeah.
I
know
don't
we've
think
had
that. I don't think that's
discussion.
Nick. But this is arguably, but I think there's not much to argue about, the biggest single sporting event in Stamford history, because it was two undefeated Stamford teams, just by luck. It could have been Stamford against Rip against New Canaan, or Catholic against Darien, but no, it just turned out that it would be Catholic against Rip. And there had to be, if you went to that game, there had to be 17,000 people. I mean, there were people in the trees outside the stadium. There were people on top of cars outside the stadium, on the roofs of houses. It was that big a thing in those days. And I remember being in the stands, you could barely move. It was so crowded. Just an amazing, amazing thing.
For sure. Wherever.
And if you don't show 52, that guy's going to be mad at me. Just going to do real
No,
quick.
we'll certainly keep him happy, whomever he may be. We'll know soon enough.
And that's Jeff Beadle on a 45-yard touchdown run against Rippewalk. Jeff, whose father played in the 40s, and his cousin played anyways. But I told you, Jeff, I was going to make you famous.
Yeah, and that's a great picture of Jeff.
This number 53. This is the Stamford Nutmegs.
Let's not forget the women.
Yeah, when we cut this down to just football and baseball, it effectively eliminated a lot of the women's sports. Now, everybody knows who the Ray Bestos Breakettes were.
Yeah, I've interviewed Joan Joyce, an amazing lady.
And a couple of Stamford girls played on them, but the Nutmegs were a Stamford fast-pitch team. And they were quite good. And they used to play in front of sizable crowds at Belltown Field. And we had an autograph ball from them. Luckily, we found a couple of old Advocate clippings, but we also found some negatives of actual games being played.
Yeah, and I recognize the outline of Belltown. That's really something. And we will move to our next slide, which will be...
Well, that's a team picture of the Nutmegs at number 54, if you want to do that.
Sure. Now, whom might we recognize?
To tell you the truth, in the better pictures that we had, there were no names attached. You know, and I tried to cross-reference with older pictures, but I was unable to. And I threw this thing out on a Facebook page for Stamford, and nobody came back with any names. I think a lot of them are gone now.
And that's, and I'm recognized, isn't that the same outline of the batting cage at Belltown?
Yep, that's Belltown Field.
Belltown Field, yeah, for sure. And, okay.
Number 58, I'm sorry, 55, I'm going blind here. The Little League World Championship trophy.
Okay,
and they all got jackets.
Yeah. Andy Wassel was a member.
Andy Wassel was, he was something else.
I used to watch him play.
Yeah. And the next one, I better just keep this in sequence, might be interesting.
Okay.
Number 56. Sal Magley visited our kids, the Stamford kids, in '51.
He actually came to Stamford?
No, that's at 1951. That's at Williamsport.
Oh, he was at Williamsport.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's a guy, if you look at his career, who had a terrific pitching record, and you just get, and he's almost lost to history.
Yeah.
Now we...
Cy Young.
This is Cy Young.
Same deal. Cy Young came to visit them down in he was 84 years old then, didn't have much longer to live, and he signed, I think I mentioned the last time I was here, that he signed a ball that we had in the exhibit.
Yeah, that's a record we're never going to see. And we'll move to our next slide. Next, that's the Nutmegs, which we have seen. Now,
This
we'll
is, how about this?
beyond that.
This could mess up a kid for life, you know, being 12 years old and you're signing autographs. You'd be peaking at age 12 maybe. But a little girl came out to ask for an autograph.
Oh, isn't that sweet?
For them.
Is that Mickey?
I think that's Mickey.
It
sure
does
looks
look
like
Mickey. Yeah. Mickey on the left.
Yeah.
He's like, wow, this is the life of a ball player.
Yeah.
I guess we'll move to our next slide over.
And that's them taking the field. 1951.
And that's... now, who was the coach of that team?
Little birdie wants to tell me Mickey Leone Sr.
Mm-hmm. It's
But
probably
I could be wrong. I
Yeah.
should have thought of that before I brought the...
No, believe me, just a curiosity. We'll move to our next slide. We're back to Benny Bahunik. Okay, so then we'll scan the board again.
60?
Number 60.
60 is the Stamford Bombers.
Bombers.
This is a semi-pro team that played at Mitchell Field, which is, we would remember the location as being the Starlight Drive-In.
Yeah, current
I
people,
think
the Ford dealer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Zeke Bonura was the guy that ran this team, and this article here, this is a little sort of paraphrase from an article about how they were bringing black players to the Bombers without any controversy. Zeke brought 6 players up when all the baloney was going on with Jackie Robinson, all the grief they were getting for that. Zeke Bonura brought these guys up and said, if you don't like it tough, they're playing.
Did Zeke play in the major leagues?
Yes.
He did.
I want to say the White Sox, but I don't know for sure.
And that's the Gurley Building at 322 Main Street. Holy cow! That's something else lost to history.
Yeah. The next, maybe 61?
61. And
this is
tell us what happened here, because I tell people.
Well, there's 2 of them.
There's 2.
This is the 1938 game. The St. Louis Cardinals came in 1938 to play the Twilight
And this
League.
was commonplace back then. Big league
Yeah,
teams would play.
they didn't like it too much.
No, I'm sure they
And it
didn't.
was money for the team, especially during the Depression years. But the pros did not like to play these. But this game, they came to Belltown Field and they beat the Stanford All-Stars pretty good. I wish I could remember one of these guys on the Cardinals hit a ball.
Johnny Mize.
Johnny Mize.
Because I was told that playing it, but see the house out there.
Yeah.
Johnny Mize hit that on a fly.
That's like incredible.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen me?
I've taken people there and shown them the house.
Yeah. Jeez. And this, that up in the right-hand corner, that's the game ball, not the game ball, but the Cardinals all signed that ball for the Stanford guys.
Mhm.
And the name on top is their manager, Frankie Frisch, who had just retired as a player and was managing the Cardinals then. Now there was another game in 1941 where the Stanford Pioneers played them, and that was the one that you think you might. The Cardinals did not want to play this game, and they played that at Mitchell Field, and they took the Stanford team rather lightly, and a lot of these guys had signed at one time under minor league contracts on the Stanford team, so you're not talking a bunch of schlubs from a beer league. At a certain point in the game, it was 5-4. Or more than 5-4, with the Stanford team leading, until somebody in the Cardinals said, this can't happen, and they started battling back, and I guess whatever, at the top of the last inning or something, one of the Cardinals coming up to the plate, and somebody comes over to him and says, listen, this is, again, I'm paraphrasing the story somebody told me, we got to catch a train in 20 minutes. So, okay, so they went up and they fanned on purpose to end the game, so it ended up with a Stanford 5-4 victory over the Cardinals, but that's just legend. I'm sure the guys on the Stanford team that are still around would say, no way,
we beat them fair and square.
Yeah,
it's really, think about the Yankees coming in to play a semi-pro team today.
Are we cruising? I don't want to be dragging my feet here.
No, we have 3 to 4 minutes.
Well, just real quick.
Number 65.
The Stanford Golden Bears, we talked about
This
before.
is the original Golden Bears.
The original Golden Bears. This is the Grunberger Trophy. They won the league championship back in 1940. If you want to move along.
Sure.
Can we scroll down some? I wanted to mention the coaches. The coaches. Oh boy, there's so many of these guys.
Number 7.
Yeah. Mike Boyle and Paul Kutso, great influence on so many kids. My uncles played for them. You want to skip to the next one?
Sure. Number 71.
There is this is Jack Lockery, the old Mahashka. That was everybody old timers. That's what he used to say when he used to get your spirit up.
Wow, and he's a husky fellow there.
You gotta give it the old Mahashka. He had a real gravelly voice. He was quite a guy. The next one is
number 72.
This is Jack Hagan, Al Shannon, and Carmine Tashes, the coaching staff at Stanford High in 1960. And the next one,
number 73.
That is Coach Layden and Coach Shannon of the Stanford Ripperwam State Championship team in 1965.
Yeah.
Next one is Lenny Rivers and Bob Horan shaking hands with Al Shannon after that FCAC championship game that Catholic won and ultimately got the state championship.
Number 75.
Number 75 is Mike Setti, great Ripperwam coach with Bobby Valentine. Remember Mike Setti?
Mr. Setti, remember him well?
Yeah.
Extremely nice man.
Great guy here. This is Sharkey Lorraine and Stan Borowski.
Yeah.
These guys are great coaches. Some of these guys, it's remarkable to hear about them. They weren't just like some guy that got stuck coaching in the Little League because nobody else would. These guys had a love of the game and a love for teaching kids. I would hear stories about them, and I regretted that I did not play for them. I don't mean to disparage any of the guys that I played for, but I got beaned twice in 3 weeks, and once I was knocked cold. And I never nobody had any idea how to address that. So for all intents and purposes, I couldn't play baseball anymore. I tried, but nobody ever attempted to get me past that. These guys could, and they did so much for, there's grown men now who look back on these people with such tremendous respect. So anyways, kudos to the coaches.
The umpires tournament every year, which...
now we could just do the next one real quick.
Okay, and we'll close here. This is number 70. No, we can maybe get one or two more.
Okay, this is just for Carm Lamone. He was a young assistant when I was a senior at Catholic High. He's a great guy, and his players gave him this Black Knights trophy when he was there with them.
Isn't that sweet? Okay.
If I want to zip by, these are just a different school. Some of these things here. That one, 82.
82.
This is a Betts Academy, this glove we had on display, and Ball, the guy in the picture, is is Harold Green, the right fielder at Betts Academy, and he's wearing that glove on his left hand in 1905.
And we'll close that up.
Can I just...
sure.
If we can we do this last one here?
84.
Forgive me, that is my Uncle Harry. And he was the youngest of the Salato family. His three older brothers were big stars in their day. My Uncle Ralph, who actually lost an eye playing for Stanford High in the 1930s, was the captain of the Stanford High football team. His brother Bucky, Albert Salato, was born in 1917, was a huge basketball star in his day, got a scholarship to Villanova when the war broke out. The other brother, Joe, was a terrific basketball player, ended up being a war hero in World War II. Harry was the baby. All of those guys in older age said that Harry was the most gifted athlete of all. He'd have been the greatest of them. And when the war ended in 1945, and the boys were coming home, Harry went down to West Beach and dove in shallow water and broke his neck and died. And hope you forgive me for taking a little personal moment to remember my Uncle Harry, who I never knew. Give him a moment of kudos that he never lived to get himself, and I thank you for letting me do that.
No, believe me, and I appreciate your doing it. We can certainly dedicate this show to Harry for what could have been, but yet his memory and the memories of so many others in this wonderful Stanford Sports exhibit. You got to come back in 2014 with the exhibits that you're doing, you and Ron.
Yeah.
And this stuff it's like boxing in the 1960s, just feeds off its own energy. It's unbelievable.
Oh, yeah. And this is just a tiny little bit of it, of what we actually had.
It's a great legacy, and only this show again is only to the efforts of the fine guests and the fans we have, and I'm just blessed to be here. Dan, thanks so much.
Tony, thanks for having me.
Wonderful
to see you. See you again.
Thank you.
All right.
And we'll be coming back very soon with former MLB pitcher John D'Acquisto. So stay right here. Tony D'Angelo coming around third to the home stretch. Right back after this, late in December. Jackie Gleason.